The Journal of Jesse Smoke, Part 5, page 48. March 3rd, 1838. Dry weather continues. No rain has fallen. We are going ahead with our usual chores at the end of winter, getting ready to plant our corn. We trust that John Ross will again win a postponement of the removal. We try to live our lives in everyday fashion, but we are worried. Only the very young, like my little sisters, seem to be unaware of what it all means. They are excited by the comings and goings of so many men in uniform, on horseback and afoot. Ruthie has taken to counting the soldiers as they pass by. Her count reached 507 on this day alone. More and more troops are continuing to arrive. The forts have grown in number. We are quite surrounded like hostages in our own land. At the end of each day I see how my mother stands, her eyes on the setting sun. That direction, the direction of the darkening land, is the way the whites wish us to go. It is also, in our old beliefs, the direction of death. March 5th, 1838. The feeler visited me again last night. I was by myself, sitting on the porch, looking at the new moon. On one moment I was alone, and the next he was there beside me. "Woo-hoo-hoo," the feeler whispered, drawing my attention to the distant call of the screeching owl. "He warns us that the enemies are close." I nodded in my agreement. The feeler looked up at us, or at the new moon. I looked with him. Our beliefs. The sun and the moon, our beloved grandparents. They are given the charge to look after human beings, after Golonita. The supreme power made the world. I tried to remember the way the old people say we should speak to the moon at this time, but I could not. As if reading my mind, the feeler spoke for both of us. "Idudu," he said to the new moon, "maternal grandfather, we greet you. When it will be like this again, still we will be seeing each other." March 6th, 1838. Still no rain. Chief Hildebrand has left for Washington. He carried with him the petition protesting removal in the fraudulent Treaty of New Okeechobee. It had been signed more than 1,500 Cherokees. The petition will be given to John Ross and presented to Congress. Spent some time after working in the cornfield playing sticks with Bear in the water, Crow Caller, and Snake Killer. Otter is not well and could not join us. Begun coughing hard 2 days ago and could not get up from bed today. When we went by and called out to him to join us, his mother was worried. Did well in sticks. Almost every time I threw 4 sticks up into the air, they fell in my favor with the rounded sides up. We played for buttons, and I won them all. The others teased me, saying I only won because the feeler has given me special good luck medicine. My happiness at playing well and their teasing were all half-hearted. We kept thinking of Otter, missing his jokes and his laughter. We Cherokees have seen this sickness before. Some of the many soldiers who have arrived here were coughing in a similar way. Though this sickness makes white men ill, they usually recover. But when our people get this coughing sickness, often they die. Our old medicines do not work against it, even when the white doctors have a hard time curing us. I'm very worried about Otter. Before I went off to mission school, he was my closest friend. I have always called him brother. March 8, 1838. Last night I heard an owl calling again in the nearby woods. It was a call from the direction of the darkening land. This morning the news came, brought to our house by Snake Killer. My friend, my brother, Otter, died last night. April 18, 1838. I have not written since Otter's death. I say to myself that it is because I am too busy with the spring planting and work about the farm, but I also know that my heart is sick from loss of my friend and the terrible feeling that that ever more losses lie ahead. It seems as if every other length of our fences must be replaced, and I am splitting rails. Though I have grown better at the job, it is still tedious work, made more difficult by the dryness. Due to the conditions of the drought, there is much dust, and the crops have grown slowly. I opened this journal many times, but I was unable to think of anything to say. Now, however, I must write. The new military commander has been appointed, just as Chief John Ross expected. It is General Scott. Our chief is meeting with him now in Washington, but General Scott will soon arrive and take charge of the troops here. It seems as if the soldiers are everywhere now. Perhaps there are 10,000 of them. They have built more stockades with with walls 16 feet high. Our people watch as they build them, knowing those grim walls are not meant to protect are not meant to protect the troops, but to pen us in like cattle. April 19, 1838. Received a packet of Northern newspapers sent to me today by Reverend Worcester, the Boston Patriot, the Liberator, and the New York Commercial Advertiser. One contained another of John Howard Payne's letters in support of our people. For more than 3 years he has tried to help our people, even being jailed by the Georgia Guard on one occasion. He is now with John Ross in Washington, both of them meeting with Joel L. Poinsett and the new Secretary of War. Their aim, I am told by Reverend Worcester, in this accompanying letter is to convince the Secretary of War that any roundup of our people should not be done until the autumn, so that we may at least bring in our harvest. April 20th, 1838. About John Payne. Met Mr. Payne 2 years ago, a true gentleman with a broad, intelligent forehead, a sensitive smile, and eyes that are both bright and mild. Although has a fine voice, one might expect of a composer. I told him that I admired his song, and had learned the playing of it while at the mission school. His response was modest, saying that he had but dashed it off, never expecting it to be so greatly popular. Mr. Payne told me that though the world has sung his song, and nearly every heart is familiar with the melody, he had been a wanderer from his boyhood. He then laughed and told me about when he and Chief Ross were jailed by the Georgia Guard to keep from going to the meeting where the Treaty of New Ochoa was signed. The chief began humming his song. Mr. Payne then said to the jailer from behind the iron bars that he had written the song. His hope was to strike up a conversation and perhaps stir enough fellow feeling to lead to their release. Mr. Payne then shook his head ruefully. The man's response, he said, was a rough oath, followed by another chorus. It is the best song I have ever heard, I told Mr. Payne. It touches the very heart of what Cherokee people feel. Here are its words. Mid pleasures and palaces, though we may roam, be it ever so humble, there is no place like home. A charm from the skies seems to hallow us there, which seek through the world is never met with elsewhere. Home, home, sweet, sweet home, there is no place like home, there is no place like home. April 22, 1838. Preacher San visited a day, helped me split the rails all day. In the evening we sat on the porch and talked quietly while my mother was at her spinning wheel and my sisters were helping her. The pleasant sound of the spinning wheel can be heard from nearly all the Cherokee homes, whether humble cabins or guard mansions, both of which exist in good number among our people. Long ago we did not have cloth for our garments, but dressed in deerskins. It would take the skin of 4 deer to clothe one man. We welcomed the cloth brought by the white traders. It was much easier to make clothing. We even adopted the style of wearing cloth about our heads in a turban, as we did the Creeks and other southern Indians. It makes us rather resemble Hindus, that the western tribes with their feathered headgear, or at least this is what John Howard Payne, who had traveled to far lands, had assured me. With the spinning wheel we could make our own clothes and not rely upon the white traders. In so many ways the Cherokees have become a very model of Thomas Jefferson's perfect American, gentle farmers, self-sufficient upon their own land. Although John Ross still hopes that the government of the United States will give us justice, Preacher San no longer believes this will happen, saying that money, not justice, rules Washington, that the Senate ratified the Treaty of New Ochoa was proof of it. I reminded him that it was only by a single vote, and that many of the senators had taken up our cause, but San would not be moved on this argument. 1 vote, or 100, it did not matter, just as it did not matter that only 20 of our people signed the treaty, or that none of them were empowered by our nation to do so. paper, whether it was money or lying treaties, means more to Washington than human lives. My anger showed itself in my actions. I stabbed my knife deeply into the wood plank before me. San placed his hand gently upon my arm to calm me. I understood. We Cherokees have given our solemn word, even though we might feel angry and betrayed, we would never take up the hatchet. Our actions would prove to the world that we were not savages. But who now are the savages, I thought. Who indeed? April 26, 1838. General Scott is on the move. He will arrive soon, set up his headquarters at New Ochoa, our former capital. April 29, 1838. Still very dry weather. The water in the creeks and rivers is low, as it would usually be in the late summer. Fortunately, neither our spring nor our well have gone dry. Spent my free time reading poems of John Milton today. For some reason I was drawn to Paradise Lost. As soon as I began to read, I found myself lost in its grand lines. Time flew by as I read, and when I lifted my head from its pages, the entire afternoon had passed. On reflection, I cannot help but picture the serpent who deceives the good, innocent Adam and his wife at Old Hickory, President Andrew Jackson himself, who among us were the ones to accept that fatal apple. Will the angel with his fiery sword soon appear and drive us out of Eden? May 12, 1838. The worst has happened. Scott has issued an order for our immediate removal. All must hasten to prepare for emigration and come forward so that we may be transported. His address, dated May 12th, has been posted widely throughout the Cherokee Nation. May 15, 1838. A few of our people are following the orders of General Scott, carrying what possessions they can. They are making their way to one of those 3 collection points. They are along the rivers at Gunter's Landing, Ross Landing, and Cherokee Agency. Although the waters are low in Tennessee, they plan to take us west on floatboats. Many of my people, like my mother, have made no preparations for leaving. We shall trust in Cooey, my mother says. John Ross has a plan. Our second chief, George Laurie, has remained here in our Cherokee Nation while John Ross fights for us in Washington. Whenever he speaks, he echoes my mother's words. He also reminds us that the words spoken in council by the old warrior, woman killer, who died not long after speaking these words, that many of us know by heart. My companions, woman killer said, men of renown in the council, who now sleep in the dust, spoke the same language, and now I stand on the verge of a grave to bear witness to their love of country. My sun of existence is fast approaching to its setting. My aged bones will soon be laid in the bosom of the earth, and we have received from our fathers, who had it from the great being above. When I sleep in forgetfulness, I hope my bones will not desert you. Chief Laurie has assured us that John Ross is still negotiating and having some success. The Secretary of War himself has promised that there will be no forcible roundup of our people before fall, when it is more practical to travel. The great majority of our people speak no English, and no great plantations, and live closer to our old ways. They have little or no knowledge of all that is happening. All they have is their deep love for this land and their trust in our leaders, especially San Usti, will abide by the will of our people. I observed this today, and I spoke to a friend of mine, his name being Standing Turkey. His family numbers 10, and they farm the land along the Hiawassee River. He and 3 others in the family are readers of Cherokee. He and his brother are mechanics, and the 4 women in their family are weavers. Though their place is small, it has fine soil, good water, and a small herd of cattle. It is much coveted by the white men who have been surveying it with hungry eyes. Standing Turkey was on his way to the blacksmith to have a tool mended. He greeted me as we passed the road. I turned and followed him. Neither of us spoke for a half mile or so as we walked together. You are still filling your book with words, he said to me at last, monitoring his chin at the journal under my arms. I nodded. It seemed that everyone knows of my journal now. I have been teased about it often. Such gentle teasing, though, means that people approve of what I'm doing. The sound of galloping hooves approaching came from behind the bend. We stepped to the side, climbing over the rail fence just in time to avoid being run over by a company of white soldiers on horseback. Their faces were grim, and the sun glinted off their guns and bayonets. They seemed to take no notice to us, and they soon disappeared, leaving nothing behind but the choking clouds of swirling red dust. Standing Turkey and I returned to the road, clouds of red dust rising from us as well as we brushed ourselves off. They seem determined, Standing Turkey said. But Kui will defeat them.